In a train carriage, a man's saliva dripped onto a woman's shoes, but she didn't notice. Suddenly, the man transformed into a hideous monster, ferociously gnawing on the woman's face, creating a scene of terror and chaos in the compartment. Terrified passengers desperately fled. Yet one girl remained calmly seated, as the monster curiously approached her, but the next moment brought a horrifying sight. This was a classic anime of violent aesthetics. With its dark and bloody fighting style, this received praise from many online users. It was the anime Blood Sea. The story's protagonist was a girl named Saia. Saia appeared as an ordinary high school girl during the day. She was beautiful, smart and popular among her peers, but her true identity was that of a demon hunter. Guided by her father Tadayoshi, she hunted down a species of demon called Elderbairn. On this day, as the setting sun faded, the sunset was like blood. Saia traveled alone with her family's blood sword. Soon, she arrived at her destination, where a mysterious Buddha statue stood upon the water, evil aura lingering around it. Saia knew this was her prey for the night. She slowly drew her blood sword. Its icy blade marked her determination to slay the creature. Saia cautiously advanced. At that moment, the Buddha statue trembled slightly, then swiftly approached Saia at an incredible speed. Saia swung her sword to counter the attack, but the statue's outer layer was too thick, unable to harm it in the slightest. Witnessing the statue's renewed assault, Saia raised her sword above her head, gathering her strength for a strike that felled the statue. Yet, the statue rose once again, transforming into its second form, and immediately launching a frenzied assault on Saia. Seizing the opportunity, Saia wounded the monster with a single strike, but her weapon was knocked out of her hand by the creature. Enraged by its injuries, the monster went berserk. Without her weapon, Saia was no match for the demon. The monster's massive scythe-like arm tightly grasped Saia. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Saia broke free from the grip. Then she quickly approached the blood sword. Reclaiming her weapon, Saia transformed into a war goddess. With a single strike, she severed one of the monster's arms. Gazing upon the fallen monster in a pool of blood, Saia remained remarkably composed. Because this is part of her daily life. But she didn't know, what she thought was her daily life is actually an elaborate deception. On this day, Saia learned from her teacher's mouth an absurd fact, that the world she was familiar with was actually a falsehood. It was an elaborate scheme devised by someone. Not only was Saia's memory tampered with, but even those so-called teachers and classmates, and every person in the city. They were all hired actors. They are being controlled by a force called the Tower Organization, and now, they had finally grown tired of this life. They wanted to break free from it completely. Then they poured a bottle of demon blood into Saia's mouth. As Saia's pupils turned crimson, unfamiliar memories flooded her mind like a tidal wave. Then, a man appeared in her memories. At that moment, the mastermind behind it all, Nanahara, also arrived on the scene, and his true identity was the leader of Tower Organization. Saia recognized Nanahara as the man from her memories. In Saia's recollection, Nanahara revealed the whole truth. It turned out that Saia was also an Elderbairn, but she was a special kind of existence, feeding on the blood of her own kind, and possessing the power to control Elderbairns. Everything Nanahara had done was to exploit Saia and harness her immense power. So, he did everything he could to capture Saia and wipe out all her memories. Then he arranged this false life for her. But now, with the truth exposed, his experiment could only come to an end. But for those disobedient actors, he had to deliver punishment. In the next moment, a gigantic demon appeared and crushed a male student, then devoured him whole. Twin sisters, terrified, tried to escape, but in the end, they became the demon's food as well. The teacher, terrified, collapsed to the ground. She desperately ran into Saia's house, pleading for help from Saia's father, but Tadayoshi suddenly bit her to death. Saia arrived at that moment, only to find her father had lost his sanity. Nanahara explained that Tadayoshi was a half-breed of humans and Elderbairns, the closest existence to Saia. That's why he had Tadayoshi play the role of Saia's father. At this point, Tadayoshi's body began to mutate, and he launched a swift attack. Saia, who had no intention of fighting, was no match for Tadayoshi, but Tadayoshi was determined to kill Saia. In an instant, Saia's demeanor changed, as if the Grim Reaper had descended. She swiftly killed him. Saia looked at her father, who had finally broken free from control. She vowed to make Nanahara pay the price. Just then, Nanahara shattered a mysterious mirror. Suddenly, a massive demon appeared. Saia attempted to continue her pursuit, but she was blocked by ambush soldiers on the other side. The demon, split in half, rose again. In an instant, it split into countless individuals. They descended upon the town, launching a merciless slaughter. Their methods are extremely cruel and merciless. The entire town was transformed into hell, and those attempting to escape were ruthlessly gunned down by the soldiers. Only because of what happened in this city, to keep the outside world from discovering. Meanwhile, Saia continued her chase. But Nanahara had already boarded a helicopter. Filled with anger, Saia leaped into the air and jumped into the air. However, Nanahara shot her down with a single bullet. Even though her head was pierced, it wasn't enough to kill Saia. With her eyes glowing crimson, a grand revenge battle is about to commence. No matter what awaits her ahead, it will be torn to shreds by her completely. Inside the train, a man's saliva dripped onto a woman's foot, but she didn't notice. Suddenly, the man's face contorted rapidly, transforming into a disgusting monster, viciously devouring the woman's face. The horrifying scene caused chaos in the train compartment, terrified passengers desperately fleeing, afraid to become the monster's food. However, one girl was at odds with everything, sitting calmly at her table, unaffected. The monster approached, leaning in, intent on consuming her, but in the next second, blood and flesh flew. The monster's head was almost smashed into pieces, amidst agonizing howls. All the light bulbs in the train compartment shattered. The monster fled like a startled rabbit, entering the midst of the crowd, just as it was about to prey on humans and heal its wounds. Saia kicked it away. The monster took advantage and kicked the train door open, then grabbed a girl and escaped. Saia leaped out of the train in a flash. Her eyes cold, resembling the Grim Reaper, the monster climbed up the tower crane with its only remaining arm. Its wounds are bleeding profusely. Endless anger and pain twisted into a distorted roar. Little did it know that this roar also revealed its location. Saia chased relentlessly, once again finding the monster's trail, but it collapsed due to its severe injuries. Desperate to heal its body, it crawled towards the girl, yearning to consume her. Yet, the monster's fate had already been sealed. With a single sword strike, Saia completely dealt with the terrifying monster, and just at that moment, a helicopter from the tower organization arrived at the scene. Saia, bathed in light, showed no fear. Endless hatred surged fiercely in her eyes. Coincidentally, Mana, the girl who was captured by the monster, had her companion arrive at the same time. Not only that, they seemed to be aware of the Elder Baron's existence. Clearly, they were not ordinary residents. Before Saia could inquire further, a cleanup team from the tower organization had arrived. Everyone had to set aside their doubts, quickly getting into the car and fleeing. The boy named Fujimura was obviously a member of some organization. Fortunately, their organization possessed powerful hacking skills. After they successfully extinguished all the city lights, they managed to escape the pursuit, and just at that moment, Fujimura received a communication from headquarters. The person on the computer called out Saia's name and asked if he wanted to kill Nanahara. Then, he invited Saia to meet and talk. Meanwhile, on the rooftop of a high-rise building in the city, Nanahara was leisurely enjoying himself. But after hearing the report of an Elder Baron's death from his subordinate, Nanahara fell silent for a long time, because the moment for his long-prepared plan had finally arrived. In order to take revenge on Nanahara, Saia was invited to the headquarters of the hacker organization. However, to her surprise, the leader, Kureto, not only knew everything that had happened to Saia, but also had knowledge of the Elder Baron. Upon Saia's questioning, Kureto revealed the truth behind the matter. It turned out that Kureto and Nanahara were actually cousins. Their two clans had been guarding the contract between humans and the Elder Baron for generations. This contract prevented the Elder Baron from indiscriminately killing humans. The so-called Tower Organization was the name of their two clans combined, but for some unknown reason, 6 years ago, Nanahara betrayed their mission. In his quest for control over the Elder Baron, Nanahara slaughtered Kureto's entire clan. Now, he and Saia shared a common goal: to seek revenge against Nanahara. The next day, Saia brought Mana to a mysterious shop. And the shopkeeper had been waiting for them. After a brief reunion with the shopkeeper, Saia expressed her desire to obtain a powerful sword. Soon, they discovered a sword with a crimson lacquered finish. The sharpness and chilling aura of the blade caught Saia's attention. She immediately asked what price the sword required. But the shopkeeper merely said they would discuss it later. The next day, everyone received news. Nanahara would be giving a speech at a school. Despite knowing it could be a trap, Saia didn't want to miss this opportunity. Torrential rain poured down. Disguised as high school girls, Saia and Mana arrived at the school. They joined the students and took their seats. And finally, Nanahara appeared. In the next moment, an unexpected incident occurred. The sound of an alarm suddenly blared, and everyone began evacuating. However, Saia tightly gripped the sword in her hand. With Nanahara's greeting, she erupted in anger and rushed forward. Her eyes turned crimson, and with a single strike of her sword, Saia realized something was off. She looked up and saw the person before her was an illusion. In the next moment, the doors closed tightly, and a massive elder baron crashed through the wall. Immediately, it launched an attack on Saia, but with her sword in hand, she effortlessly severed any tentacles that came her way. Saia then flew towards the elder baron. Just as she was about to strike a fatal blow, she was punched and sent flying by the elder baron. The elder baron pursued her relentlessly and latched onto Saia's body, biting her. The revolting creature stretched its neck to the extreme, but as Saia's eyes turned scarlet, she managed to forcefully throw the monster off. Then she held her sword in her backhand and swiftly decapitated the monster. Although this wasn't enough to kill the creature, but then, Saia, like the Grim Reaper, used her sword to cleave the elder baron in half. However, just as Saia and Mana were about to retreat, they discovered that the main gate had been locked by someone, and at that moment, enemies hidden in the smoke swiftly attacked. Saia could only fight back with her heavily injured body. Fortunately, at a critical moment, their teammates arrived in a car and crashed through the gate. Everyone hurriedly retreated. It was clear that everything was a well-planned trap. Nanahara's motive was simply to obtain Saia's blood. Now that their group had been exposed, their only choice left was a direct assault. The final battle was about to commence. In the dark hall, danger was lurking everywhere. With the sound of sword sheaths falling to the ground, countless bullets instantly rained down. However, the ambushed soldiers discovered that there was no one there. But in the next moment, Saia was already by their side. However, due to the curse contract she was bound by, Saia couldn't kill humans. Even as strong as Saia, there was nothing she could do. The battle reached a tense impasse, but in the next moment, a mirror flew through the air in a graceful arc, and then exploded with a deafening blast. Saia could only hastily defend herself, but she was soon buried under the rubble. Filled with anger, Saia rose up. With just a single strike, Saia defeated the man, but hindered by the curse contract, Saia couldn't go further and kill him, and at that moment, Nanahara's voice echoed in the hall. The man received an order, and then poured a vial of blood over his own head. Amidst his agonizing screams, his body rapidly transformed into a terrifying monster. Then, he began to massacre the surrounding soldiers. Taking advantage of the chaos, Saia escaped from the battlefield. She arrived at a mysterious room, where Nanahara was already waiting for her. But the next moment, with dizziness and weakness, Saia fell to the ground. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself lying on Nanahara's knees. To make matters worse, Kureto was also present. Clearly, all of this was a conspiracy planned by the two of them, but Kureto didn't know. Nanahara had already wanted to finish him off. Then, Nanahara put Saia's blood into Kureto's body. Immediately after, Kureto's body rapidly transformed. Demonic eyes opened on his chest. Amidst his painful screams, Kureto's entire body started to wither, and at that moment, Nanahara finally revealed the whole truth. It turned out that the number of elder barons in this world was decreasing, and Saia could only use elder baron as food. But Nanahara's experiment to create artificial elder barons had failed. This meant that one day, Saia would eventually face death, and he did all of this out of love for Saia. But the next moment, suddenly, Nanahara's tone changed. It turned out that the monster Saia had killed to protect Mana was actually Mana's father. These crazy words instantly broke Saia's heart. She madly rushed towards Nanahara, but was sent flying by a massive arm. As Nanahara merged with the elder baron, the entire base instantly crumbled. The colossal arm stood tall like a pillar supporting the heavens. From high above, Saia looked down. A terrifying demon god had descended upon the earth. Its enormous body radiated apocalyptic power. However, Saia did not retreat. She charged towards it with her sword raised. Despite being surrounded by countless small demons, Saia's crimson eyes had already shown her determination. In the end, Saia shattered the core of the Elder Baron with a single strike, causing its massive body to dissipate. Saia, with her heavily injured body, approached Nanahara. He didn't understand why Nanahara had done all of this, but Nanahara didn't answer. He grabbed Saia's sword and plunged it into his own chest. Nanahara was not in pain. Instead, his eyes were filled with endless tenderness. Then, for the first time, he embraced the person he loved in his heart. Nanahara's love was passionate, yet twisted and selfish. He was willing to stain the world with blood for Saia. Like a solitary flower blooming beautifully but lonely,